It's a new day on SpaceX Daily, Episode 12. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Today is June 23rd, 2026. Here's what's happening at SpaceX today. Starfall's first reentry capsule flight tests the hardware path to routine orbital cargo return that could enable in-space manufacturing at scale. The Falcon 9 carried the first Starfall reentry capsule on a demonstration flight. The capsule is designed to return manufactured goods from orbit without crew. Early data on thermal protection and recovery systems will inform follow-on vehicles. No on-orbit manufacturing payload flew on this initial mission. The capsule targets point-to-point return of high-value items produced in microgravity. Recovery on land or at sea would bypass long-duration station docking constraints. The design trades payload volume for rapid turnaround compared with Dragon. From an engineering standpoint, the compact disk geometry cuts heat shield area while still fitting optics or crystals, and by dropping crew systems, it lowers the deorbit propellant load. If the thermal data hold, the capsule could fly multiple times after only tile inspection, shrinking the cost multiplier that now separates raw materials from a finished return vehicle. The next milestone is whether the recovery system can land precisely enough on land to avoid sea retrieval costs. While Starfall pushes the return leg of orbital manufacturing, ground infrastructure must scale to match the launch cadence required to feed it. SpaceX has informed NASA of plans to launch Starship every 8 days from Kennedy. Current pad infrastructure, propellant storage, and road networks fall short of that cadence. The assessment highlights needed upgrades to deluge systems and lightning protection. No schedule for those upgrades has been released. Kennedy Space Center infrastructure is not yet sized for the 8-day Starship cadence SpaceX has discussed with NASA. Propellant lines, road access, and lightning protection all require upgrades that have no announced schedule. The gap leaves open the question of whether Florida operations can support the rapid reuse goals set for the vehicle. Remember, the show covered Starship flight test cadence on episode 11. Today's report moves the Florida side of that arc forward by flagging where pad limits could slow the reuse goals. Florida upgrades are one piece. Production capacity is the other half of the same scaling problem. Construction targets an annual output of 1,000 vehicles through assembly line methods rather than traditional aerospace hand-build approaches. The facility design emphasizes parallel production of tanks, avionics, and heat shield tiles. Output at that rate would directly support the 15-launch lunar architecture described in separate reporting. No completion date for the factory is stated. This production push sits squarely in the Starship reuse thread we have tracked since last episode, where the open question remains how quickly flight rate can climb once vehicles exist. High production volume only matters if the vehicles can actually reach the moon. The propellant math shows how many flights that really takes. The architecture calls for multiple tanker flights to deliver propellant for a single lunar landing mission. Each tanker must reach orbit, transfer fuel, and return, multiplying total launches. The count assumes current Starship payload and specific impulse figures hold. No margin for failed refueling attempts is included in the baseline. The same refueling architecture underpins the ongoing orbital test campaign, so these numbers directly test whether the 15-flight model can close without added margin. Domestic test cadence remains the nearer-term driver. Flight 13 preparations continue at both Florida pads. Starship Flight 13 prep continues at both Florida pads, with 11 deluge system tests logged so far. LC-39A and SLC-37A are being readied in parallel for the next integrated flight. The test count reflects emphasis on water flow reliability ahead of higher energy engines. No static fire date has been announced. Work continues at both Florida pads with 11 deluge system tests logged so far. LC-39A and SLC-37A are being readied in parallel for the next integrated flight. The test count reflects emphasis on water flow reliability ahead of higher energy engines. Lab Padre's June 22 update shows continued work on the orbital launch mount and flame trench modifications ahead of the next ship's static fire, plus new cabling runs that may support additional sensors. Observers note new cabling runs along the tower that may support additional sensor suites. The post also flags ongoing heat shield tile application on Ship 39. No timeline for the next full stack rollout was given. A state-funded tender for tank tooling plus a delivered stainless steel forging and launch pad planning point to work on 7-meter class vehicles. The diameter would exceed current Falcon 9 and approach early Starship scales. No flight hardware has been shown, and timelines remain unspecified in the tender documents. Observers note the move would require parallel advances in heat shield and landing leg technology. A Falcon 9 liftoff from Vandenberg is scheduled after local sunset. Sonic boom timing and trajectory data have been shared with Arizona counties along the flight path. Residents are advised that visible exhaust plume and possible window rattle may occur. No payload details were released. A Reddit thread discusses viewing angles for an upcoming Falcon 9 launch from Morro Bay. Posters compare sightlines to previous Vandenberg flights and debate whether the distance justifies staying put or driving south. Several users posted photos from prior events showing the plume visible over the hills. Arizona residents posted early reactions to the nighttime Falcon 9 advisory, with some sharing apps that predict boom arrival times. Comments focus on whether the trajectory will produce audible events farther east than usual. On the AI front, Elon Musk's Terafab project targets placement of 1 terawatt of AI compute hardware in orbit aboard Starship vehicles. The concept would rely on Starship's payload capacity and eventual refueling architecture to deliver and service the orbital clusters. Reflection AI signed a computing power agreement with SpaceX for access at the Colossus data center. The startup will receive capacity on NVIDIA GB300 chips housed in the Mississippi facility. SpaceX confirmed a third large compute deal at Colossus, again supplying GB300 capacity to an external customer. Monthly payments under the new contract begin July 1st, and a quick market note, SPCX closed at $160.20. Before we go, watch for the next deluge system tests at LC39A that could set the static fire window for Flight 13. That covers everything worth knowing about SpaceX today. SPCX is trading at $160.20, up 2.2%. A quick rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify goes a long way. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you tomorrow. And before you go, this show is part of the Narra Network, a family of daily podcasts covering tech, science, markets, and more. If you enjoyed today's episode, give Unintended Consequences a listen. True stories of good intentions that backfired. You can explore the whole lineup at neurantnetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.